thank all the dignitaries who are present for this very important conference. Let me begin with offering my homage to Principal Dr. Shivajirao Bhosle. You see, I didn't have much contact. I didn't have much direct contact with Shivajirao Bhosle. But you see, as way back in 1967, he had come to our school gathering as a chief guest, in which I was felicitated for several achievements. That time he had noted me for the first time. And after that, he had kept something in his mind. I completed my master's degree from Pune University in 74. He did not contact me, though he contacted my teacher. He said that he wanted me to join some of the colleges. I don't know whether it was Mudhoji College or some other college in that area. But unfortunately, I was very sick and I was prescribed 1 full year bed rest. So during that period, I did not move anywhere. I was just bedridden. And meanwhile, I had joined my research work also in the Pune University under the able guidance of Professor Surendra Barling.
Oh.
Later on, I completed my doctoral work and then joined Pune University. This is my association with Principal Shivajirao Bhosle. He knew me, I don't know whether closely or whether distantly, but he had shown a keen interest in me, in my career, my development as a student and researcher of philosophy. Now, I am very happy that on this occasion of 29th June, his death anniversary, my friends Sunil Datta Gaure, my friend Raskar, and many other my friends who belong to Fulton originally, they have invited me to join this particular conference, and so I am very happy. It is being said that Principal Shivajirao Bhosle was a great orator and he was giving speeches. And he was known as an orator, a popular orator. People were impressed by his hypnotizing speeches. But is it really the case? Was his achievement limited to this particular level? I think it was not the case, because the topics he had chosen for delivering his speeches were the topics of life and thoughts of the great philosophers of the country. Most of them, they came from Maharashtra. Why most of them did come from Maharashtra? Because Maharashtra has been a land of producing thinkers, saints, philosophers. And of course, he was Maharashtrian, no doubt. But he began his thought, spreading the thought from Swami Vivekananda. I want to point out here that he was not just a popular speaker, but what he did, we must look at it from a different angle. All of us are aware of the Renaissance movement in Europe. How did the Renaissance movement begin? The Renaissance movement began with the cultural upliftment and what the philosophical thought was behind the cultural upliftments. I must also point out to you people that the chain or series of revolutions in the modern world, they had begun from the Great French Revolution. Who were responsible to bring about that particular revolution? It was Jean-Jacques Rousseau and some other people who were responsible. That is, their thought was responsible. So unless and until our thought reaches the masses do not get awakened. And this particular point was noted by the European culture, and the new thought started developing in Europe. But what was the texture of that new thought? The texture of new thought was the rationalistic spirit to look at the human life. And that rationalistic spirit really shaped the European culture, and following European culture, the entire world. And therefore, I think the organizers must have thought choosing this particular topic as rationalism in Indian philosophy. I guess, I don't know, but I guess that there may be some another reason also picking up this particular topic for this conference. Usually, and that usually means the Western culture, the Western countries, the Western civilizations, and the Western philosophers, they have been branding Indian philosophy as the spiritualistic philosophy. And as against this spiritualism or spiritualistic philosophy, the rationalism or rationalistic philosophy emerges. Now the task before is to understand and evaluate what is rationalism. Is there rationalism in Indian philosophy? Then what about the spiritualism, the spiritualistic texture, the spiritualistic tradition of Indian philosophy? I mean, these are highly confusing problems. But when we go on studying the Indian tradition, that is the Indian philosophical tradition, right from its origins, then we say that these problems are, really speaking, the pseudo problems. We have to understand right from the origins, going to the origins of the emergence of the philosophical thought in Indian culture, and then try to understand what was their texture, what was their attitude, what was their vision to look at human life. You see, Indian philosophy is concerned with human life. Indian philosophy is concerned with the human problems. Indian philosophy is concerned with the social crisis. And these social crises, these human problems are the problems which are being tackled on philosophical level. The problems are obviously the mundane problems. The problems are on the empirical level. The problems are the problems of the material world. And now the question is, when the problems are of the material world, when the problems are on the mundane level, how can we offer a solution to it from the spiritual plane or in terms of the spirituality? And this has been the dilemma which has been faced by the Westerners or westernized Indian scholars. Under Westerners, I include westernized Indian scholars, that is, those who are influenced by Western categories, those who are influenced by Western language, those who are influenced by Western culture, and those who are influenced by Western thought. Let me begin with my first point. And my first point is, let us try to search for spiritualism in Indian tradition, which is antagonistic to the rationalism. I must very humbly submit to all of you that as a parallel to the word spirit or spiritualism, so far in my studies of 50 years of philosophy, I have not found any Western parallel to it. The word spirit, the word spiritualism has been a kind of parallel to Adhyatma and Adhyatmika. If we understand the idea of spiritualism, and if we just try to study Adhyatmikata, then we shall see that there has been a great basic difference between both of them. And when there is such a great difference between both of them, and then we shall understand that why there has been such a misunderstanding. I don't know whether it is a deliberate misunderstanding or it is just a misunderstanding by overconfidence of the Britishers who were trying to rule this country, and they realized that if you want to rule the country, you have to rule the thought. Were they really capable of ruling the Indian thought, the Indian philosophy? Obviously, they were not. Then, if they wanted to rule the society, and for ruling the society, if they want to rule the thought, then they must present the thought the way in which they can criticize, the way in which they can rule it. And that is how we see the changes, we see the modifications, and I call all these changes and modifications as the perverted versions of Indian philosophy, Indian culture, and Indian tradition. There are many words which we come across in the Oxford Dictionary. Every 8 to 10 years, Oxford Dictionary is getting revised. And when it gets revised, the number of words which are included as the standard colloquial words to be used in English language are added. And you will see that there have been many English words included in. They are from the Indian origin. They are from Indian languages. They are from Indian dialects. The word Atman is also, we can see in the Oxford English Dictionary. But in order to understand that Atma or Atman or Adhyatmiko, Adhyatma means that which is about Atma. They could not understand the word, because understanding any word, you have to understand the concept behind it, and any concept is nothing else but a culmination of a long cultural tradition. If you are away from the long cultural tradition, how can you understand the concept? And this particular lack has given them a lexicographical parallel, and the lexicographical parallel of Adhyatmiko is given as spirit or spirituality. Why do I say this? Okay, although the original source of Indian thought goes to Vedas, I shall not touch the Vedas at this juncture. There are many reasons, there are many historical reasons, many sociological reasons, and there are many philosophical reasons. So I shall not touch the Vedas, but what about the later part of Vedas, where there is more and more concentrated contemplative part, and that more and more contemplative part of Vedas is known as Upanishads. And Upanishads has been the real source, the direct source, the formulated and declared source of the philosophical thought of the Indian tradition, of the Indian culture. So what does Upanishad say? What does Upanishad do? These Upanishads, they are concerned with the problems. What kinds of problems? Obviously, the problems of human life. And in order to understand, before understanding, we need formulation of the problems. So the problems are formalized, the problems are analyzed, and the problems are understood. And once the problem is understood, its solution is offered. And so there are attempts by Upanishads. Here I must mention you, just while going, the point I would have mentioned a little later, but here itself I would like to mention you that there was a great scholar coming from Nagpur, Kaila Daftari. His books on Upanishads, I would request each and every student and researcher of philosophy to read that. He has made an attempt to give the interpretation which is very consistent, which is real with the Upanishad and Upanishadic tradition, where he is showing that so-called spiritualism, so-called mysticism does not exist, does not belong to Upanishads and Upanishadic traditions, And if it does not belong to Upanishads or Upanishadic traditions, how can it percolate in the Indian tradition? So we have to keep in mind this particular tradition and then understand. Now let us come back to the problem after making this reference to Kela Daftari's contributions, very great contributions in order to study Indian philosophy. We must also know that he was a person who was very well Purva Mimamsaka, and Purva Mimamsa also he has interpreted in such a way. Purva Mimamsa is another system of Indian philosophy which is considered to be, though it is not a fact, but which is considered to be a culprit of several categories of thought which are leading us astray from the mundane life. In fact, which is not the case. If it is not the case, then what it is? That is what we have to go and search and find out in our journey. Although the journey is very, very long, although this particular topic is not just a topic either for any doctoral dissertation or postgraduate program, but in fact the rationalism in Indian tradition, in Indian philosophy is a work, an encyclopedic work. If one has to write on this, then one has to write an encyclopedia title with this particular title. But I'm just giving you the beginning alphabets of the introduction to this particular topic. So I have begun with the Adhyatma or the spirituality. And in this Adhyatma or spirituality, you see, this spirituality is opposed to materiality or materialism. Spirit and matter has been the dichotomy in Western philosophy. Is there such a dichotomy in Indian philosophy? There is another very important, significant dichotomy, which is a version of the dichotomy of spirit and matter, but which is a popular right from Cartesian period, that is Descartes put it, body and mind problem. Body for them is a matter and mind for them is spirit. How do they understand this body and how do they understand this mind, or how do they understand this spirit? They understand body as something which is unconscious matter, and they understand mind or they understand spirit as something which is totally bereft of any material component but pure spirit. And I must tell you that such a position, such extreme views are not taken in Indian philosophy. Then what is the scale through which Indian philosophy works? Yes, there is a scale in Indian philosophy. There is at the one hand, at the one end, there is something which is physical, something which is material, and at the other end there is something which is not material, which is not physical. But what is the relation between them? The Panchamubhutas on one hand and Brahman or Atman on the other hand. Now this is the scale, and let us try to pass through this scale. The Panchamahabhutas are never without consciousness, and the Atma is never available without Panchabhautik Sharira. So there is a scale. I mean, I must point out to you, many of you must be the students of logic, students of modern mathematical logic. So in modern mathematical logic, we study the predicate logic. And in predicate logic, there are quantifiers. And we talk about the scope of a quantifier. Now the scope here, or in another language I may use for scope, the range here, the range begins that for the scope of quantifier, the first half of the bracket and there is last half of the bracket, and that is the scope, and that scope is governed by the quantifier. Now, if this is what we take, then this is the range. Then at one range, at one end, that quantifier is operative on is the range begins with Panchamahabhutas. And another end is the end of pure consciousness, Atman or Brahman. And these Panchamahabhutas, if we follow some other systems, that is, why other system? Because in some other systems, a more detailed analysis of Panchamahabhutas is given. That is Tanmatras. And how do Tanmatras emerge? I am just referring to Sankhya system of philosophy. There we can see that the consciousness continues. The proportion or the level of manifestation or the form of functioning of consciousness may be least, but is never absent, either in the case of Tanmatras or in the case of Panchamahabhutas. And in the case of Brahman or Atman, everything is included. It is, they are saying, the Vedanta, that is the Upanishadic thought, says that this Vedanta is concerned with the ultimate reality, the highest reality in totality. And each totality includes Panchabhautika world also. Beyond Panchabhautika world or various combinations of the Panchabhautika world, there are different formulations. So here we get both of them together, and in order to understand, being students of logic and philosophy, we have to use the category analysis. There are different levels. On the base level, there is so-called matter, or on the base level, there are Panchamahabhutas. And on the higher level, as you see, I spoke to you about the scope of a quantifier. I spoke to you about a range. But you see, this is a linear model. I am not interested now presenting just the linear model. It is not just a horizontal model, but we have to think of the vertical model also. So as in the vertical model, there are different layers, there are different levels. So this Panchabhautika increases also on the vertical level, and then the materiality, that is the density, gets reduced and the abstractness gets increased. That is how from Panchamahabhutas we come to Atman or Brahman, that is Adhyatma. So when we talk about Adhyatma, we are not talking about pure spirit as it has been spoken in Western philosophy. We are talking about the ultimate reality in totality, which is, if analyzed in terms of components or in terms of inseparable parts, then it is a combination of both Panchamahabhutas and consciousness, Panchamahabhutas and Atman. So that is how it has been presenting the picture of its formation. Now coming to the problems. Now whenever any problem is felt, the problem is felt, the problem is faced, and the problem is to be solved on the ordinary material level of ordinary life. Now in this ordinary material level, ordinary life, there is always a conjunction of body and mind. There is always conjunction of body and spirit. Are they separate? Whatever Descartes may say, let us keep aside Descartes and let us again belong properly and properly, deeply and deeply into the Indian tradition and into Indian philosophy. Now, here comes the use of the vertical model of the range, of the scope. There is a point, or now I shall use a third model. That third model is the model of cross-section. I mean, one is the line of materiality, another is the line of spirituality, and at the point of cross-section, there is a point where our life, our so-called mundane life, we are living. It is a cross section of matter and mind, or matter and spirit. That is the life. And there we face the problem. And when we face the problem is faced. Where is the problem faced? The problem is faced on the body level. The problem is faced on the society level. The problem is faced on the psychological level, that is mind level. The problem is also faced on the intellectual level, that is buddhi. So the problem is faced on sharira, mana, buddhi, samashti, all these levels. But where is the problem understood? We say the problem is felt. That is, we are conscious of the problem. You see, when we undergo for some major surgery, the surgeon cuts our body into parts. Are we aware of that? We are not aware of that because he has kept our awareness dormant. So far our awareness is dormant, we do not face the problem. But when our awareness is not dormant, when it is awakened, then we face the problem. And when we face the problem, then the problems are real to us. The feeling of the problem, you see, that is the sensation. And what is it? Where do we get sensation? We get our sensations on our body, on the level of body. And so these sense organs are very important. There are different kinds of levels of facing the problem. As I said, that there are mental, intellectual, etc. problems. There are also social problems. Now, social problems, again, I classify into two classes. One, the latest modern problem is the modern problem of the epidemic of COVID, or epidemic of flu, SARS flu, or epidemic of the early century epidemic of plague, etc. These are on social level. But there are another problems also on social level, and those problems on social level are problems of the war, the threatening of the war. That there are different kinds of terroristic activities, and so on and so forth. Then the economic crisis is also there. That is also felt on the social level. But all these problems, the social level problems, they are the mundane level problems. They are the mundane level problems, and we had to tackle those mundane level problems. And how do we tackle those mundane level problems? Do we have any mechanism for that? Do we have any model for that? And yes, in Indian tradition, in Indian culture, in Indian philosophy, there have been many models. There have been many approaches to tackle any of these problems. Now, since I said that this is an encyclopedic work, and I'm just going to put before you alphabets of the introduction, I shall just, for the sake of example, take one model, and that is a very, very important model. One of the most popular models, and that is the model of Bhagavad Gita. What is Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita, now let us put Bhagavad Gita on the conceptual plane, and let us draw a conceptual map of Bhagavad Gita. And if we just draw the conceptual map of Bhagavad Gita, then what we see? We see that in this conceptual map of Bhagavad Gita, there is a problem, and that there is an attempt to solve that problem. Now, this is the model. Basically, this is the model. And we must understand that this model has been used by many social workers, by many leaders, by many social leaders, political leaders, ethical leaders, and by many seers and many great philosophers. Let me come back to the modern times of the Indian history and culture. You know that there have been several interpretations of Bhagavad Gita. Even till today, people have been writing and giving their interpretations of Bhagavad Gita. While making those interpretations in Bhagavad Gita, do they harm? Do they modify the basic text of Bhagavad Gita? Largely speaking, no. Scholars point out that at some places, Shankaracharya has put avagraha. What is avagraha? Avagraha is a replacement for a. And what is a? A is the negation. A is the abhava. And what kind of abhava it is? It is atyanta bhava or it is bheda anyonya bhava, something like that. But keep aside that Vidvat Charcha, keep aside that logical analysis, and let us try to come to understand the way in which the model of Bhagavad Gita is being used to discuss the problem. I must mention here, okay, let me begin with Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya. From Adi Shankaracharya, let me come till today that there are some people whose names I don't remember just now, but at least recent times there have been in the current century there have been some people who have been giving their commentaries, their interpretations of Bhagavad Gita. Why? Because they see some problem and they are offering the solutions to these problems. And amongst them, you see, amongst them, I would like to just remind you of three such approaches. One approach was the approach by Swami Vivekananda. And here I see the philosophical relevance of great Shivajirao Bhosle, Principal Shivajirao Bhosle's attempt to put this Vivekananda's thought before the society. The putting Vivekananda's thought before the society was attempt not only by Pracharya Shivajirao Bhosle but by many other people to open a new Renaissance period in Indian culture, but which had directed to the political situation also. Shifting from Vivekananda, let me again make reference to Lokmanya Tilak. Now, what was the interpretation given by Lokmanya Tilak? I mean, the interpretation given by Vivekananda was Raja Yoga. And through Raja Yoga, he again developed different varieties like Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Prema Yoga, and so on and so forth, where he is really explaining, rather he is solving the problems not only on social level, on the mental level, on the intellectual level, or in the personal life and in the life of relationship also. And now coming to Lokmanya Tilak, he wrote that Gita Rahasya. Now in Gita Rahasya, he has again given an interpretation, and these people, through their interpretation, they have created a large motivating force to give a direction, to give a moment, to bring about a desirable change which takes the society to the positive goals, to the achievements, to the richness of the society. I'm saying not the richness in terms of the wealth and money, but I'm saying richness in terms of the thought, tradition, culture, practices, action, norms, and values. So this is what these people are doing. So this is what Lokmanya Tilak did. And I would like to mention here another name, but I shall take that another name in a twin, that is Mahatma Gandhi and Vinoba Bhave. Mahatma Gandhi's Anasakti Yoga and Vinobaji's Sthita Prajna Darshan. I mean, if we take them together, then what is it? Are they not nothing else but the solutions to the interpretation of Gita for solving the problem which the society is facing? Let me go back a little bit to Yogi Arvinda. Yogi Arvinda also made great use of this Bhagavad Gita. And we must point out, or we must note, that Yogi Arvinda has tackled Bhagavad Gita not just on one level, on many levels. All of us know that what was his earlier character? His earlier character was that he was a revolutionary. And then he turned to yoga and yogic practices. then he became a yogic person whom in modern terms people call as mystic. Now, whatever he did in Bhagavad Gita's interpretation, very important concept he had picked up is that of Loka Sangraha, and the way in which he has given the turn to this Loka Sangraha. One, and another was his yoga. Now again, yoga is another culprit which is being misinterpreted and misrepresented by the Western and Westernized Indian mind by making it only a spiritualistic practice, which is not the case. Now, if we just try to understand this model of Bhagavad Gita, which is a model to tackle any problem, then what is there in this Bhagavad Gita? There are different levels, and on different levels, the problem is tackled. In original, bare text of Bhagavad Gita, yes, there are different levels. And in the commentaries, interpretations of Bhagavad Gita, yes, again, again it is discussed on different levels. What is the center of this Bhagavad Gita? And obviously the center of this Bhagavad Gita is the man. And who is this man? Now Bhagavad Gita has added another dimension, another aspect to understand this man. A few minutes ago, I spoke to you about the Bhautika or Panchabhautika and the Atmika or Brahmika aspect of it. Now it adds the aspect of karma, action. And here we understand what is man. One of the most simple definitions and one of the most penetrating definitions of man is that he is a continuity of performing actions. And through this continuity of performing actions, he faces problems, he solves problems, and again he proceeds. So keep before us these three dimensions, or keep before us these 3 points. Man at the center, karma at the apex, and I'm using the model of a triangle. And at the one hand, there is Bhautika, and on another hand, there is Atmika. So this is a triangle. Bhuta, Atma, and Karma. This is how the triangle is there, and its center is the man. This is how man is understood, and when this man is understood, then the replies to human problems are offered. And while offering these replies, none of the point of the triangle is sufficient. All these triangles or all these points of the 3 triangles are to be considered simultaneously together. And so this this kind of analysis is being offered here by those who are tackling with the human problem. There is a base for this tackling of human problem. I have begun with Bhagavad Gita as one of the models where problem is formulated or where problem is put before us. There are different systems of philosophy who are tackling this problem from different angles. Just now I mentioned to you when I was making statement about Panchamahabhutas, I was making reference to the Sankhya analysis of 25 tattvas. And then I had taken you up to Tanmatras, and we can go backward. Not necessary just now. But this is one model. And as this is one model, there are other models or other frameworks also. This metaphysics of yoga, the metaphysics of Sankhya is being used by yoga, which is nothing else but the practical aspect of life. Now, yoga is, as I mentioned to you just a little while ago, that is another stream of Indian philosophy which has been misinterpreted as purely or highly spiritualistic, which is not the case. According to me, which is not the case. Because whatever they are saying it in terms of the actions which are to be controlled. And in order to control those actions, yoga goes to the origin or emergence of the actions. And that is how yoga begins with atha chitta vritti nirodha. It comes on the level of vrittis, and there are vrittis, that is the appearances, that is the formulations, that is the various forms, that is the various modifications. All these forms, modifications, etc. are of what? They are of chitta, that is the consciousness. So the origin is in the consciousness. And where is that origin in the consciousness? Right? The origin of the consciousness, vrittis, they are felt, they are seen, that is, they are manifested in the body. They are manifested in mind, they are manifested in buddhi. And again, please try to understand, for all systems of Indian philosophy, manas is panchabhautika and buddhi is also panchabhautika. So it is bhuta vastu vishaya. It is bhutatmaka. So the understanding or making mind or buddhi as totally away from materiality, from physicality, is really the wrong perception, wrong understanding of Indian philosophy. As I pointed out to you, there is a scale. And that scale now I am putting it on the, not on the horizontal level, but on the vertical level. And then you will understand that on a vertical level, the physicality part is less, but that is the base. Although it is the less, that is the base, and nothing works without base. Without adhara, there cannot exist any adheya. So adhara dheya bhava is the necessary requirement. And this adhara dheya bhava is the necessary requirement. Then what is adhara? You see, on the practical level, the bhautika construction is the adhara, but on transcendent level, chaitika construction is adhara. So you see how we look at it, how we treat it, and for what purpose we use it, it all depends what is adhara and what is adhi. Now this man is being seen, one who is facing the problem is the man who is made up of 5 gross elements, having the consciousness as seed. But although we are using this language, it is for the sake of linguistic security or linguistic convenience that we are treating them as different. They are not separable, they are distinguishable. That is, conceptually, they are to be thought, they are to be taken as separate. Another point here which I would like to mention to you or bring to your notice is, which is really the culprit, the target of spirituality, spiritualism is Ishvara. Now, can Ishvara be translated as God? Almost all these Western and Westernized minds have done this. But if we just try to follow the etymology, then Ishvara can be better, not exactly, but better translated as Almighty, which has the power to control everything. Isha Sattayam Ishvara. So that is this Ishvara. And this Ishvara is the target to criticize spirituality, spiritualism, and the Indian tradition. And yoga also talks of Ishvara, because Ishvara Pranidhanatva, that is one of the famous sutras which is being taken out of context for understanding and for criticism. Just now I mentioned that it is taken out of context. It is one of the ways, va, that is or, That is weak disjunction, not strong disjunction. It is not conjunction, but it is disjunction, and it is a weak disjunction, that is inclusive disjunction. It is not exclusive disjunction. So there are some other ways which are mentioned, and in other ways, one of the ways is this Ishvara. And when they are describing this Ishvara, how do they describe? They describe this Ishvara as that particular entity which is to be taken as the object for concentration, where he is in some or other form of Purusha. That is, a human form is given. But what kind of Purusha? Where there is excellence of knowledge. There is excellence of all sorts of abilities. But he is not away from the so-called material or mundane world. And that is how we come, and we have to come back to the mundane world. And here, again, we have to make reference to this Purva Mimamsa also. They are talking about it. Purva Mimamsa is talking about Swarga and Naraka. Purva Mimamsa, as people say, is talking about previous birth, this birth, and life after death, that is the next birth. What is this? This is interpretation. If we go to the original text, and here again I want to make you aware of one very important point, that Indian tradition is a very rich tradition, very long tradition, and whenever a tradition is very, very long, there are several thoughts which join it. There are several perspectives to look at it. There are several understandings to add to it. But for me, Indian tradition, Indian spirit is one and only one which is seen in its original form. And if we see it in its original form, then we understand that the stress on materiality, the so-called materiality, of course, the stress on bhautika or pancha bhautika is being given there. I shall rather widen the scope, but for me it is a kind of digression, because I am not going to touch upon that, because that will again demand too much time. When I am talking Indian philosophy, I am including in it the Jaina tradition and Buddhist tradition. Whatever I am talking about, the so-called relationship between matter and spirit, or materiality and spirituality, that is the complex of Mahabhutas and Atma, that is being presented in the different way, but in the same spirit, on the same lines, either in Buddhism or in Jainism. I shall not speak more about that. As I said, that will be giving much more digression to the main thought which I have articulated in my mind to present before. But they are not away from that. Now let us come to the another aspect of it, and that aspect is the aspect reference to Charvaka system. It has been always understood, always said that Charvakas are the materialists, and it is always said that Charvakas are the only materialists. This is what people say. Now, what is their materialism? They believe in Mahabhutas. But do they believe in Pancha Mahabhutas, that is 5 gross elements? No. They accept 4 gross elements. And how do they account for this Atman, that is consciousness? Then they say that it is a kind of chemical reaction which takes place when there is a particular combination of these 4 gross elements. That is how they give the explanation. And they are the people who are denying Swarga, who are denying Narka, who are denying previous birth, who are denying life after death, next birth, and many other things. They are purely mundane. That is, in what sense are they mundane? They are empiricists. In what sense are they empiricists? Are they empiricists as we understand empiricism in the Western tradition? No. Empiricism of Western tradition as compared to Indian tradition and as compared to Charvaka is a very narrow understanding of empiricism. When Charvaka's empiricism, or rather Charvaka's approach, we have to understand it in a particular way. And when we come to this rationalism, then we have to understand, or rather we have to go to the point, where is the origin of this rationalism, or what is the parallel of rationalism in our languages? Then Buddhivad, rationalism, Buddhivad parampara, Buddhivadi parampara, and for reason the word is Buddhi. So now let us talk about this Buddhi. The standard methodology and standard logic which is being followed by all the systems, including Charvakas, in Indian context, on Indian horizons, is formulated and standardized as there is ISI standard, that there is standardized by Nyaya system and especially by Navya Nyaya system. So directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, that is the way in which the Indian thinking in the Indian tradition, the philosophical thinking of this tradition is molded in that particular form. And in that mold of particular form, what we see in that mold of particular form, we see that they are using the word Buddhi as a synonym to Jnana. Buddhi is synonym to Jnana, and for them also, for Naiyayikas also, Manas and Buddhi, they have some proportion of Mahabhutas. And now let us come to this Buddhi and Buddhivada. When we come to Buddhi and Buddhivada, then we are talking about reason. Then what is the rational way of rationalism? You see, the basic principle of rational way or rationalism is to reduce any problem and execute the program of reduction. And when we are reducing the program or following the program of reduction, then we get abstract logic, or we get formal logic. In the understanding or in the sense of modern mathematical logic, Nyaya logic or Jaina logic or Buddhist logic may not be that kind of formal or abstract logic. Nevertheless, it does develop the forms which are abstract forms, which are the forms which we follow in our thinking. And when we follow in our thinking, then what we get is the Pramana Shastra. Pramana. Now the word Pramana, what does the word Pramana mean? Pramana means ordinarily the means of knowledge. And from Pramana, the adjective is Pramanya. Another adjective from Pramana is Pramanika. Now, this Pramanika in Marathi language means Imandar, honest. And in Hindi language, it means valid. आप जो कुछ युक्ति दे रहे हैं, क्या वो प्रामाणिक है? Is it a valid argument you are offering, you are presenting? This is what is the sense of Pramanika. That is that which is based on Pramana. And Pramana is always thought in terms of the procedure which make it Pramana. That is, now here the word Pramana is also used as standard.